and I was intrigued to also show the project that I'm working on. This is a project worked on for a company, but I'll keep the company and business things short. I'll just give a short explanation. Sadly, behind me, you see the prototype I designed. It didn't arrive yet because of the component shortages. So I hope to return in the future and show it once more. Change the PowerPoint view.
Yeah, we're actually seeing the presenter screen. That's the one. Yeah.
Okay. The content of presentation, short explanation of blockchain attached storage bus, overview of the hardware, the development kit and open source aspect. And this won't be a long talk, but I'll just show my way of thinking, how I'm using Raspberry Pi. And if anyone has any input whatsoever, we would love to hear it. Because we really want to push this to open source, especially the hardware. The explanation is, I'll just read it. Functionland is replacing cloud storage and serves subscription economy by introducing a new category of projects called blockchain attached storage. It creates value by auto-minting crypto for the users and allocating a share to the developers. They are in the top 3% of GitHub and backed by some also Web3 blockchain companies. What I just try, because most people here are mostly a little bit tech savvy, is to make the whole subscription that you pay Google, Amazon for storage, for compute, to give the power back to the people and just use your own hardware or designed hardware like I do for anything you want. The box is built up out of a hardware grid. This is it houses up to 9 towers. I'm designing 2 of them. One in the middle where you can see, do you see my mouse or not?
Yes.
Yeah. Here in the middle, in the front row will be the main hub. That will divide the power, make the connection between the different towers. And it will house a Raspberry Pi Zero wireless, just to set the connections. It won't do anything fancy to compute. It will just communicate over IC squared or SPI with the USB hub chips and just set connections. So it will say tower 1 and 4 can be connected together. Every other tower has no access. It also guarantees some security and still keep it accessible, because if someone wants to program the Raspberry Pi in its own way, they'll have access to it. The main hub itself, this was an early stage design and we haven't worked much on it yet. It will have some USB chips, the Raspberry Pi Zero wireless. This is nothing fancy yet because we're first focusing on the tower and the development kit. But it will have space for USB-C connections, for storage, for anything really. And the Raspberry Pi Zero will not have access to the USB-C connections directly. It will only have connections to the USB hub chip, and it won't need to interact with the storage or peripherals that are attached to it. Almost skipped one. And this is the hardware tower 1. This is almost ready to go into production or for prototyping. As you can see, it has a nice compute module. I don't know if anyone knows here what Framework laptops are, but Framework makes a laptop that is user serviceable. They give like instructions how to replace parts, and they have nice modules that you can plug in to have a terabyte of storage or a USB-A port or an HDMI. We aim to use those modules to give people the opportunity to just plug in 1 terabyte storage module of them. And as you can see here, we have nice 2 slots accessible to have up to 2 terabytes of storage. The Raspberry Pi has a PCI Express connection to a hub chip and then USB 3.0 x2 to the chips for maximum allowable bandwidth for now. And as you can see, I'll later show it in the design too, we still keep the possibility to insert an SD card, direct USB it is a USB-C connector, but it's just 2.0 to the Raspberry Pi itself and HDMI. So you still can reconfigure the Raspberry Pi because FunctionLand, the company that's making this, aims to just ship it ready to use for the mainstream. But I said, like, if you want to keep it open source, you need to give people the opportunity to interact with the internal IO and just give them free reign to do whatever they want. Some other towers that we might be working on that won't really have like Raspberry Pi in them, but a dedicated x86 architecture tower, GPU tower. I mean, they just released a new GPU with like 600 watts of power draw, and USB-C only has 100 watts, but look at future. ASIC or FPGA tower, because, well, you can do pretty much anything with them. And it, like I said, limitless options. They aim to push like a standard template, like this is bare minimum what you need. Have fun with it, design your own tower. And which comes to the development kit, and I really hope that it would arrive in time. It will arrive somewhere, maybe next week. This is the whole box scaled down, where we have the Raspberry Pi Zero wireless connecting to the USB hub chip and setting the possibility of those 3 USB ports. Are they enabled? Which USB port can communicate with which one? And you can that way connect the Raspberry Pi compute module to it and just play around. We aim to have 5 prototypes by next week. That's really bad. Like, yeah, like most of you know, it's the Raspberry Pi compute module has the 100-pin connectors twice. And to have the counter connector, we found one supplier in Brazil that could deliver 1,000 of them for $25 a piece. Just to give a image how bad it is sometimes. And I will quickly switch over to my design. Yeah, so you see my design right now? Because I have no idea what's showing.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. For power, I took mostly, especially the power for the Raspberry Pi, just what Raspberry Pi themselves use in their design, because it's stable, it works, not gonna change much with it. For this one, we take a external power supply. We're not powering by USB-C standard. Because for prototype it needs to be easy, and I'm lazy sometimes. The USB control is a whole different thing. I haven't cleaned it up much. Let's see, where's the connection to the Raspberry Pi? In this one I use IC² to program this whole chip. There are 2 ports unused, because this one was available, so I had to use this one. And this way we can say the upstream port is connected to the port 1 or port 2, or all ports are enabled. But the Raspberry Pi Zero itself has no USB connection or connection to the data, because they really want to keep it separate in case of security and blockchain. And I'm no expert in that, but I design like some people want it. And these are the left side of the Raspberry Pi, like that's an SPI connection to the compute module, and for some GPIO, and same with here. Yeah, like it's really bad because I really hope to have the prototype here and to show it. So sadly, it's only a 3D model for now. Yeah, and I can't add much more to this talk, sadly, because it's really, yeah, we're dependent on delivery, and we still have, yeah, it's really bad. And the open source aspect, there is a GitHub link. I'll also post it in the chat, because I only focus on the hardware. I will do only the basics of the software of the Raspberry Pi, which I still need to figure out what. We release all production files in PDF format and for production, so Gerber files for the PCB when the prototype is successful. And even native files, like where people can design, including the libraries, will also be released. So we really give people the opportunity to have fun and make your own. And because FunctionLand doesn't want to become a hardware company, because especially in these times, it's just financial suicide. I'll also post the link to Functionland if people want to learn more about them. They, like I said, they do blockchain attached storage, but without storing the data on the blockchain. They really store the data on physical hard drives, everything in your home, and they create local pools or worldwide pools, and people can, against token payment, make a backup for you. And with that, I sadly need to end my talk because I can't show yet a physical working prototype. But if there are questions or suggestions, I would love to hear them.
You were showing the PCBs earlier in the presentation.
Yes.
And I'm not, I've never sort of had to do a PCB in that way myself, but I noticed the sockets there, and I don't see any sort of physical support around them. How are you handling that?
The sockets off?
Sorry, the USB sockets.
Oh, these these are made to be just used like this. Like you can plug a cable in them. This isn't made, like the prototype isn't made to be reliable to work for the next 10 years. This is just there'll be a limited amount sent out to some influencers and open source developers to keep playing, to start playing around with it. Because they're going to launch in the next 3 months the test blockchain net of Functionland. And they hope that, especially with the parts availability, that at the end of the year, they can start shipping the first towers. And then when they ship the first tower, they also launch the official blockchain. So in it's this one, especially in this one, it's really made to just be plugged in, play around with it, and if it breaks, well, too bad. It's a little bit sad, but it's not made for long usage, just to play around.
And the previous PCB you showed with a kind of like a 9 matrix, it looked as though it was to hold the towers.
Yes, we're still looking into that, because it most likely will use the same connectors, but I don't have at the moment this quickly a picture, but they will be encased by plastic or aluminum to give them more rigidity, so that you can just easily plug in a tower without just breaking the whole connector. But that's something that the mechanical engineer has some work to do yet. Because I can show I have that one, because this is the tower that's almost finished. It will have so here it is, mostly encased by some sort of plastic or aluminum, but we're still figuring out the exact dimensions because it needs to be a little bit bigger than in the mock-up that was drawn in. And I saw a question from Bastian, what will the crypto calculation or store the data? This will store the data, like the tower that I'm showing right now. I can 1 second. This is the storage module. So you plug in a framework module into one of those CPU connections, and that can be a storage module itself of up to 1 terabyte, or a module that has a USB-A connection on the outside. So you can plug in your external hard drive, and then you can say to the blockchain pool, like, I have 8 terabytes and I have 1 terabyte of myself to use, but I can offer 4 terabytes to people in the spool to make a backup. And you have like Filecoin and some other blockchain. How can blockchain say? Blockchain won't save the data, because you have Filecoin that uses the blockchain to save the data, but it's really expensive. It's like 10 times more expensive than a gig of a hard drive. So here you really use your own hard drive to save it, and the blockchain only verifies that you have the data saved. So the Raspberry Pi will compute, like, I have this, because it will be encrypted, I have this amount of data, and if I hash it, this hash key comes out of it, and it will verify the original copy that you have, your own data, and if it's okay, then the one that made a backup will get some tokens in that way. But it's not saved in the blockchain because that's way too expensive and way too slow. And here you're only limited by your own internet speed to the ISP and to the other people around it. But they hope that this will especially take away some power from Google, because they, like Google Photos, started in 2014, and then with a free model, and in 20 forever, and in 2018 they were like, yeah, I know, we're gonna make it now even the free tier is like worthless, so you're gonna pay for it. And they really hope that people, even if they don't have the money to buy a tower, will just, if they are tech savvy, take a Raspberry Pi or anything compatible and make their own tower and just put it to the pool and even maybe earn some money out of it. So it doesn't do mining, like it does some mining, but it's proof of resource, they call it, or proof of work. So it's not like blockchain power intensive. That's why we can also use the Raspberry Pi, because else you need a dedicated ASIC miner that takes like 1200 watts of power. So, and they aim to make it as low cost and low operable as possible. And I like Raspberry Pi, so I enjoy the project. So it's a weird world for me too, because I'm no blockchain expert too. I'm also rolling into it and I'm learning every day from it. But it's really saved like on physical hard drives with people, and the blockchain will only keep track like data A is backed by user B and it's verified. That's it. So no weird cost or high maintenance or any power intensive tasks. And I hope that especially Raspberry Pi, if it's everything that it offers up till now, especially compute module, can give it a big step forward. Can no, because the can other users access my data on his drive at his home? No, because it is encrypted with a hash that only you have, and they back up the encrypted data. And the moment you want your data back, you de-encrypt it with your own hash. So they'll need to try and break the 256-bit hash or something. So it's they store your data, but it's encrypted, so they don't know what they're storing. Which also brings some legal issues when it comes to questionable data. So they're still looking into it, how to probably stop that. Because like Google, they just check your data. Is this possibly harmful content? So it's how open source and how encrypted and how safe and how do you want to be remembered as a company? They're looking into it. But no one can access your data unless you share it with them. So that's another possibility, that you just say like, of my backup, you can access this part, but that's all software related, and I don't really do that much with that. Thank you. Thank you. Very good question. So, no, if no one has else any more questions, then I will thank everyone for their attention. And like I said, I'll post in a moment the links if you want to take a look. If anyone has some ideas for possible future towers, some adjustments, because I'm still, even though I'm engineering already like for 5 years PCBs, I still learn a lot. I appreciate some feedback. So thank you.
Wonderful. I did have a little question. How many do you think you'll go to in a stack? What do you reckon the maximum you'll ever you would go to in one little stack would be?
How do you mean in a stack?
Well, you were talking about having more than one sort of slave Raspberry Pi module, weren't you?
Yeah, like the Raspberry Pi Zero will just set the connections, and every tower will have its own or Raspberry Pi or ASIC, FPGA, CPU that will control it. But if someone wants to design a tower that only, just like the hub, provides USB connections that can be shared across any of the towers, it doesn't really need a master or slave role. So in this case, this tower has the Raspberry Pi compute module as the master, but in the whole grid, the Raspberry Pi Zero is the master because it sets all the connections, but it doesn't interact directly with the compute module. So it's hard to define if something is really a master or a slave. But within this tower, a storage tower, the Raspberry compute is in itself just a master, and it controls like what happens, or you control the Raspberry Pi, to put it that way. But it has no connection to any other tower, because this one has the possibility to work standalone. That was a major point of Functionland. They said we need to like the storage tower to just work standalone, because not everyone has the capability or wants to even to buy a full grid and buy like 9 towers for any kind of purpose. So it needs to be accessible for someone that just wants storage.
Okay.
Why is this better than if I have a TrueNAS at home, also open source? It's not better, it's comparable. The only thing that's better, what is their selling point, is that you can offer up your own storage to other people and make their tokens, their crypto tokens of it. And if they stay in value or increase, you can make some money out of it. But they really aim to go a little bit more mainstream. Like tech savvy people will mostly, if they buy this, to just play around with it. And they will not even buy the whole grid. They'll just buy a single tower and maybe some of them a grid and just play around with it. But in the end, they really aim to ship this plug and play, so people just log into it, and that's it. Like it will work for them. But tech savvy people like you and me that have their own server or TrueNAS, like it's not better if you don't believe in crypto. If you say like crypto is a fade, it will fade out and everything. Like I get your point. I kind of was like that too. Still am sometimes with some projects. But this is really aimed at mainstream, like less tech savvy people, but which are privacy minded, because that's a big selling point of them. Because my grandma will never buy this. She doesn't understand this. She just pays Google and she's fine with it. She doesn't care. But I know lots of friends who are privacy minded but don't have the tech savviness or time or will to spend to set up their own TrueNAS or server at home. I hope that answered your question.
Wonderful. Well, thank you ever so much for that.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll close off. Like I hope that next week I'll have a prototype and that I can join maybe the next one in a month or 2, and hopefully show something working, and hopefully tell you also about the mistakes I made, because I probably found already earlier one. So we'll see about that. So really thank you for your attention and having me here.
Brilliant. Thank you.